Hey, what's up, everybody? In this video tutorial, we're going to be taking a look at a third way to create our automata box. So far, we've created the automata box using the bottom-up approach, creating all the parts individually first, and then bring those into an assembly and using joints. And then the second way we did it was the top-down approach. Top-down approach, we were creating the assembly right up front, and then we were creating parts on the fly and saving those parts along as we were developing them. So the third way we're going to do this is we're going to actually use something called parametric modeling, which instead of going into each sketch and then actually identifying what the dimensions are and typing those in and kind of building up from there, what we're going to do is we're going to set up our dimensions ahead of time using something called user defined parameters. Um, and we can punch all those numbers in ahead of time and then reference those user defined parameters as we are creating our dimensions. And the cool thing is after you kind of do that, in the end, you can have a very smart part or very smart assembly according to what you kind of set up. And you're going to see what I mean by that here in just a little bit. But anyway, let's go ahead and let's get started with this. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to come up here to modify, come down to change parameters, and you're going to be seeing a parameters box that looks like this. Okay, a big button at the top left-hand corner is called user parameters. If we pick on that, now what we can do is we can type in a name. This is like a code. This is what we would be typing into the dimension. This all has to be one single word, no spaces. Um, yeah, that's basically it for the name. The expression is going to be the actual value of the dimension that we're going to be typing in or wanting to apply. And then a comment is just going to be a comment so we can kind of know what this is. Okay. So when it comes to the box, we need a width, we need a height, we need a depth. So let's just go ahead and start with our name here, which we're going to just simply call width. Okay. The width of our automata box is going to be 5 inches. Okay. And for our comment down here, we can just call this our box width. Okay. So that one has been defined. We're going to now create a new user parameter, and we're going to be calling this one height. The height of our box is going to be 4.5 inches. Okay, and we can just simply give ourselves a little comment here saying this is the box height. So we have our second one. Okay, we're going to create a new user parameter. This one obviously is going to be depth. Okay, the expression on this one, the actual distance for our depth is going to be 4 inches. Okay, and our comment on this is going to be box depth. Okay, we're going to create a new user parameter because we need to know what the thickness of our material is. So in this case, it's MDF, that medium density fiberboard. Okay, we're going to just say that this is going to be called THK, and that is 1/4 of an inch. And we are going to say this is our box material thickness. Okay, so we know what that comment is. Okay, so taking a look at automata, later on we're going to be seeing that there's going to be an axle that goes through this. Okay, so obviously we need a hole or holes for the axle to go into so it can actually rotate. So let's go ahead and create a new user parameter. And this one we're going to call axle hole DIA. Okay, the expression on that is going to be 0.25, and my comment on this is going to be axle hole diameter for our automata. And we're going to say okay. And the very last one that we do have to plug in is going to be holes in the top of this, okay? And things that we're going to be putting into those holes later on are going to be called rod guides. So let's go ahead and set up our last parameter, and we're going to call this one guide hole DIA. Those are a 1/2 inch, okay? And we're going to just simply give this a name, guide hole diameter. Okay, so we've set up all of our parameters ahead of time. Now we can go ahead and say okay. All right, so watch how this works. We're going to create a sketch. We're going to pick on this work plane here, and we are going to produce the front of our box. Okay, so I'm going to go to rectangle, start from the origin. And instead of, like I said, of typing in dimensions, now we can just simply type in words that we're going to reference, okay, dimensions to the dimensions we've already set up within the parameters dialog box. So the first one it's asking me for, this is just simply going to be height. And you can see this little gray button that pops up. We can go ahead and pick on that. Height has been applied. Okay, we can hit tab. Okay, and now this one is going to be width. We can hit enter on that a couple times. Okay, so once we apply that, we can see fx. This is basically telling us that this is a function. It's referencing something else. And what it's referencing is the numbers that we punched into parameters. So we can see that our height is 4.5, Our width is 5. Okay, that's everything we punched into the parameters dialog box. I'm going to go ahead and finish up with that sketch. Take a look at this in the isometric view. And now I'm going to go ahead and do an extrude on this. So when we're extruding this, okay, obviously this is going to be our depth. Okay, we can hit enter on that a couple times. All right, and so now we're basically looking at our overall dimension. So our depth we can see is 4. Okay, we can see that our width is going to be 5. Okay, and we can see that our depth, okay, is 4. Oh, I had the wrong one earlier. 4.5 should be our height. There it is. Okay. All right, so we're looking at the overall dimensions for our box. All right, so now what we have to do is we have to remove one face of this box. Okay, and the material thickness that we're going to use for all of our pieces is going to be 0.25 MDF. So watch how this works. We're going to come up and we're going to use our shell feature. Okay, so when it's asking you for faces and body, what it's basically asking you to do is it's basically asking you to pick the face that you want to remove. So we want the front of this removed so we can see the magic that's happening inside of our automata. Now what it's asking us is what the inside thickness of our material is, which is 0.25. Okay, we could type in 0.25, but we already set up a parameter for that, right? So let's go ahead and type in THK, and we can see that goes to 0.25. And now we can go ahead and hit enter. All right. So we can see we have our box starting to shape up here. Okay, and now what we have to do is start putting in our holes. So let's come up here. Let's go to our hole feature. I'm going to be picking on this face. All right, and now we have to give it 2 location dimensions. All right, so all I'm going to do once I pick on that face is I'm going to come here to the top. I want that hole to be halfway down, okay? If you think about that dimension that we're referencing here is going to be the height divided by 2. So let's just type that in, height divided by 2. All right, and it's going to slide that into position. Okay, it's now looking for a second dimension. I can pick on this line right here. This would be our depth divided by 2. Okay, and now we can start putting information in about the actual hole itself. Okay, so the diameter of the hole, we set up a parameter for that. That is our axle hole DIA. Okay, so we can go ahead and select that. And then how deep does that need to go? Well, that just needs to go the thickness, okay, of our material. So I can type into THK, okay, and now I can go ahead and say okay. All right, so now we can see that that hole has been, located where it needs to be located, and we can see that that has been drilled to the depth that it needs to be. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. I'm going to come in here to hole. I'm going to pick on that face, pick on this top edge. This is going to be our height divided by 2. Okay, this from here to here is going to be our depth divided by 2. Okay, and then obviously here, we're going to say this is going to be worth our axle hole diameter. That's a parameter we set up. And then this needs to be drilled to a depth of the thickness of the material. So we can type in THK and we can say OK. All right, so once again, that hole has been drilled and it's following all those parameters. Okay, all right, so we're just moving right along here. So now we have 2 holes into the top. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just drop in a hole right here on this face. Okay, I'm going to pick on this reference edge right here. I'm going to say, hey, take a look at whatever the width is, but divide that by 4. I want it to go 25% over of this face to drop that hole in. That's basically what I'm telling it. All right, so we got that. I'm going to go ahead and pick my second reference edge. This is just going to be my depth divided by 2. We want to go halfway back. Okay, now for my diameter, okay, I'm going to go ahead and type in what my parameter was, which was guide hole DIA. And then I want that to go down the thickness of our actual material. All right, so we've got that hole in. So we got a 1/2 inch hole. It's going to be 25% over. It's going to be halfway back, okay, and it's going to be following the parameters that we set up for our guide hole diameter. Okay, we got one more hole to pop in. Let's go ahead and just pick on that face. Pick on this reference edge. Obviously, this is going to be our depth, whatever that is, divided by 2. So it's 50% back. Okay, picking on this reference edge, this is going to be what? My width divided by 4. Okay, it's dropping that in place. Now I can come down here and say this is going to be my guide hole DIA. And then that needs to be drilled down to the thickness of the material. All right, so we got that. All right, so take a look at that. All right, we have our box. All right, so at this point in time, this is when we can come in and right click, go into our physical material. It needs to be made of MDF, so let's go ahead and just drop in MDF right onto the box. And then let's also come up here, go into appearances. Okay, might have to do a search for that MDF. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. Let's drop that on. Okay, so it's looking like our box. Now I get it. Right now this thing is showing as one big solid piece. Uh, so um, yeah, I know it's not going to be the way it is in real life, but here is a really cool thing, all right, that I want to show you with this. And this is why we went through all the trouble setting up parameters and plugging in those dimensions the way we did. If we come up here to modify and we go down to change parameters, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just slide this over just a little bit, size this down, and I'm actually going to bring the box into view because here's the magic behind it. We have made a smart part. So for example, maybe we're working on this, we're realizing that we need like double the width. All you have to do is come here to width. We can type in 10. Okay, go down to the next box and we can see that that has slid over, okay, or expanded to a distance of 10 inches from my width. Maybe my height is too short. Maybe we want that to go up to 6 inches. Okay, we hit enter. Okay, you're going to see that that's going to increase to 6 inches. The depth, maybe it needs to be more than 4. Maybe it needs to be like 5.5. Okay, but we can see that this is resizing here, even down to the thickness. Okay, maybe realizing that quarter of an inch is too thin. Maybe we want to bump that up to 3/8, like 0.375. You can see it is also going to thicken. Okay, maybe we ran out of quarter inch, dowel rod for our axle. Maybe that also needs to bump up to, 3/8, like 0.375, and maybe we change up the bushings, for our rod guides. Maybe those are a little bit bigger, like 3/4. All right. So instead of having to go in and edit the sketches, what we can do is go right into the parameters dialog box and we can make those changes right in there and we can see it's just simply going to resize. All right. Kind of cool stuff, right? So let's go ahead and just change this back to where it was. So our width was going to be 5. Our height was going to be 4.5. Okay. Our depth was going to be 4. Let's see, our thickness was going to be 0.25. Our axle hole diameter was 0.25. And our guide hole diameter, that was zero point 0.5. There we go. All right, so I've changed it all back, and now I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right, so all my parameters have now been updated. All right, we're still looking at that box. All right, so in this case right now, if we wanted to create these individual parts that make up the box like we've been doing, there's a couple really cool things that we can do. Okay, right now, if you take a look, you're going to see that there are no components. All right, the only thing that we have right now is if we open up the bodies folder or hit the flyout next to it, is we're just looking at one single body. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this body and we are going to split it into individual bodies, and then we're going to take those bodies and then we're going to convert them over to components. So watch how this works. All right. We obviously need to be coming in here. All right. And we need to start cutting these things apart, splitting them apart to give us these individual bodies. All right. So if you remember, the top went all the way across the top. It's basically capping off everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to plane, like my work plane. I'm going to flip this over. I'm going to pick the bottom side of that face. And I'm going to say, okay. All right. So now we can see if there's a work plane that's going right there along that face, and it's really splitting that top, okay, from the sides. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing using work plane. I'm going to come down here and pick on this face and say okay, and now that is going to be splitting it exactly where I want that to be. All right, so watch how this works. Underneath modify, okay, we're going to come down and pick on split body. It's going to ask you first to select the body that we want to split. So obviously we have only one body at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and pick it. And now I'm going to hit the select tool, and then it's going to be asking us to pick on the splitting tools. The splitting tool that we set up is going to be the work plane. So I pick it. You can see this big sort of red highlighted area, this big circle. Okay, I'm going to say okay. And now if we come in here, we can see that there is a seam there, which means that those are now independent from each other. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing for the bottom. I'm going to come down to split body. I'm going to pick on the body itself. I'm going to go to select. I'm going to pick on the splitting tool, and I'm going to say okay. Now we can see that the body or the bottom is now independent from the rest of them. Okay, so now we got to start working on the back. All right. So if you think about it, the back I said was going to be sandwiched between the top and the bottom. It's also going to be sandwiched between the right and the left hand sides. So let's go ahead and create a work plane here on this face. I'm gonna go ahead and say okay. Flip it over. I'm going to go ahead and create a plane on this face. I'm gonna say okay. Okay, so now I can go back into modify. I can pick on split body. Okay, and now I'm going to pick on not this or this, but just this one here. That's going to be the body I want to split. Now I can use select, and now I can come in here and I can find that work plane. All right, and we can see that that is now split. Flipping it over, you can see that seam is now there. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and split the body once again. This is my last portion of it. I'm going to pick on the body. I'm going to hit select, and now I'm going to go ahead and pick on the work plane. I don't know if it grabbed it. Let's try that one more time. Let's do that split body one more time. So that's the body I want to split. I'm going to hit select, and my selection tool, my splitting tool is there. There, we got it. Now I'm going to go ahead and say okay. All right, so I have all these work planes that are in the way. Let's go ahead and shut those down by just um, coming in here. We can start shutting those down independently. All right, and here's what I'm left with. I'm now left with 5 different bodies. So if I want to turn those into components, here's how you do it. I'm going to be picking the top body. Okay, I'm going to hold down on shift and I'm going to pick the last body. Okay, and all in one shot, I'm going to right click and say create the components from the bodies. Okay, now I have components 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, the issue is that these are all able to move now since they are components. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just find my bottom. That's component number 5. I'm going to right click and say ground. I'm also now going to start renaming these. So this is going to be my automata box bottom. Okay, this would be my automata box left. This would be my automata box right. This one here would be my automata box back. Okay, and this top one obviously is going to be my automata box top, right? So we now have descriptive names. We know what each individual component is. Okay, the issue that we currently have though is the fact that we can still pull those off. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just undo this real quick, bring that back. Okay, so we got a couple options. What we could do is, many of you are saying, well, we can just use an as-built joint and start attaching those to where they need to be using rigid. You're right, we could. Or the last thing, what we could do is we could just select everything. Okay, we can see that those are all my components. I could pick the top. Okay, I could hold shift, pick the bottom. Okay, what I could do is right click and come out here and say, you know what, these are all just one single rigid group. I'm gonna say okay, and now we can see that is fully constrained those. All right, so instead of coming out implying multiple as-built joints or joints, what we could do is, since everything is exactly where it needs to be, is just to select all those components in one shot, right click and do that rigid group. Okay, and we have ourselves the automata box that we're looking for. So that one is a little bit more complex. We're getting into parameters, setting all those up. But I think you're going to see the real main advantage of parameters, especially if it's just a single part like that. And then the second thing we did was we went in there. Okay, we started creating all of our bodies by using that split tool, and then in the end, we just send them over to components, and now we have our components, and getting one grounded, and the rest we can just do as a rigid group. So there you go. A little bit more complex, but you're definitely starting to see all the features that come with Fusion, okay, and the flexibility with it. So there you go. Good luck with that.